There's chaos brewing in Downing Street once again. Keir Starmer's latest attempt to rewrite the Brexit story has officially exploded into a full-blown political and legal mess. In what many see as a desperate spin operation, the Prime Minister is now trying to shift the blame for Britain's economic struggles and even the migrant crisis onto one man: Nigel Farage. But this time, Starmer's narrative is falling apart fast. Because the numbers, the evidence, and even his own past words are turning against him. Before we dive in, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more updates on British politics without the spin. Let's get into it. Keir Starmer is staring down what can only be described as a political and legal nightmare. In his latest move, Starmer has been preparing to blame upcoming tax rises and the UK's weak growth not on his government's decisions, but on Brexit itself. And more specifically, on Nigel Farage, the man he now calls responsible for Britain's so-called economic hangover. But here's the problem. That story doesn't fit the facts. Starmer's team reportedly plans to accuse Farage of misleading voters back in 2016, pointing to new Treasury-linked forecasts suggesting that Britain's economy would be £120 billion larger by 2035 if it had stayed inside the EU. That figure, published by The Times, has become the backbone of Labour's renewed pro-EU messaging, the idea that Brexit broke Britain, and that the country is now paying the price. But there's one big issue. Those same forecasts come right as the Office for Budget Responsibility warns of falling productivity not because of Brexit, but because of domestic policy failures like high taxes, weak business investment, and low confidence in the UK economy. And that's not the only claim falling apart. Starmer recently tried linking Brexit to the Channel migrant crisis, claiming that the so-called Farage boats are a direct result of leaving the EU. Speaking to GB News, he said that before Brexit, the UK had return agreements with every EU country and that Nigel Farage was wrong to claim leaving wouldn't affect border security. These are Farage boats, Starmer said, coming across the Channel. But Home Office data tells a very different story. During the final years when Britain was still part of the EU's Dublin Convention, the UK was actually a net importer of asylum seekers, meaning more people were sent to Britain than sent back. For example, in 2017, 676 migrants were transferred out of Britain, while over 1,900 were sent in. By 2018, out of more than 5,000 return requests, only 209 were successful. In short, even under EU rules, the system barely worked. Yet Starmer continues to point fingers at Brexit and Farage, rather than at his own government's failure to stop illegal crossings. And here's the irony. It was Nigel Farage himself who first exposed the migrant crisis from the Kent coast back in 2020, when almost no mainstream outlet would touch the story. He warned that small boat crossings were spiraling out of control, and he was right. Now, with the UK economy under strain, Starmer is reaching for the same old Remain-era arguments that Brexit ruined Britain. A new poll by the pro-EU group Best for Britain claims that 62% of voters now think Brexit was a mistake, mostly blaming the economy. But again, context matters. Yes, Britain's growth has been sluggish. But so has Europe's. In the second quarter of 2025, the UK's GDP grew 0.3%, triple the Eurozone's growth of just 0.1%. So much for the idea that Brexit alone crippled Britain. And let's not forget, the Remain campaign in 2016, the one Starmer backed, made plenty of predictions that never came true. They said the average household would be £4,300 worse off after Brexit. That was never proven. They warned of an emergency budget if the UK voted leave. That never happened either. Yet here we are again, almost a decade later, with Labour dusting off the same fear-mongering lines, while quietly edging the UK closer to Brussels through what Starmer calls an EU reset. Even Boris Johnson recently called him the apprentice of Brussels, warning that Labour's alignment policies risk turning Britain back into a rule-taking vassal state. But behind all the political games lies a harsher truth. Starmer's treasury is staring at a £41 billion deficit, with a shrinking fiscal safety net. Chancellor Rachel Reeves has already been accused of choking growth last year by hiking employer national insurance, a move that drove away even loyal Labour donors. And now, Starmer refuses to rule out income tax increases, hinting at tough decisions ahead in the autumn budget. So while the Prime Minister blames Brexit, Farage, and the Farage boats, the real story seems much simpler. It's Labour's own economic policies, high taxes, and weak confidence that are holding the country back. The attempt to rewrite the Brexit story has officially collapsed, buried under contradictions, exposed data, and history itself. Britain's challenges today aren't the fault of one man or one referendum in 2016. They're the result of the people making decisions right now. And speaking of Nigel Farage, the Reform UK leader is back in the headlines for another reason. Farage has spoken out following the guilty verdict of a small boat migrant who threatened to kill him, a man known online by the TikTok name Matapeza. Farage said he hopes and prays that the individual is deported to Sweden to face justice, warning that if he hadn't exposed the man's disturbing videos, he could still be walking the streets today. The migrant, 26-year-old Fayez Khan, was convicted at Suffolk Crown Court for making a threat to kill the Reform UK leader. He's the same man who posted videos bragging about crossing the channel and saying he wanted to marry Farage's sister. Court documents revealed Khan made 10 attempts to reach Britain before succeeding last October. He now faces sentencing later this month. Farage said the case shows how weak the current system has become and how people who cross the channel illegally can end up posing serious risks to the public. He ended his message with a warning. None of these people should ever be free to walk our streets. They should be detained and deported. If this case doesn't prove that, I don't know what will. So what do you think? Is Starmer right to blame Brexit and Farage for Britain's problems, or is this just another political distraction from his own failures? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more in-depth political commentary, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the world of power and politics. Thanks for watching.